A very warm good evening to all the August audience and our guests who are here with us today. It's a beautiful Sunday and also marks the Oral Cancer Awareness Month, where I Can Care along with Sterling Cancer Hospital Foundation for Head and Neck Oncology is organizing the Oral Cancer E-Conclave for the entire month. We are going to have 4 Sundays, which are full of wonderful scientific sessions for the audience and for with great academic content as well as great practical learning from prolific oncosurgeons who are here with us today on this event and will address us, and from whom we will have a wonderful opportunity to learn a lot of things. I thank all the partnering organizations and their respective representatives who are here with us today.
For that talk, I would invite Dr. Bhavna Dave. She's a very dynamic lady. She is at present, she completed her post-graduation from Nair Hospital Dental College, Mumbai in 1988. And currently, she is the Dean at KM Shah Dental College and Hospital, Vadodara, Gujarat. She is Professor and Head in the Department of Pediatric and Preventive Dentistry at the KMS DSCH and also a PhD guide. She has various publications to her credit, has co-authored around 6 textbooks, and has about 20 years of teaching experience for undergraduates and the postgraduates, along with the immense clinical experience gained over the years. For the talk, I would like to invite Hitesh Devan. He is a consultant oral maxillofacial surgeon, and he did his DNB in 2003. He has been a professor and PG guide at the Department of OMFS at the Nadyad, Gujarat, and his key areas of interest are trauma, TMJ surgery, implants, benign pathology, SMF, etc.
Thank you, Dr. Somesh, to allow me for presentation, and I'm very happy to be in this August company. Now, SMF, I am as a maxillofacial surgeon per se don't treat oral cancers. I refer them to the oncosurgeons, but I have a huge number of patients with SMF coming at different stages. As you all know that Gujarat, India is the cancer capital of the world, and Gujarat is the cancer capital of India. So in Gujarat, we say that jokingly that the milk shops open little late, but the pan shops open early in the morning. So the extent of tobacco and its adjuvants like betel nut is so prevalent that patients they come to us with basic problems of inability to eat, burning sensation, and difficulty to eat spicy food. And and when we counsel them to stop the habit, when they come for a follow-up, their most concerned part is that their mouth was opening reasonably well when they were chewing tobacco. And once they have stopped chewing tobacco or supari, then their mouth opening has reduced. Because that is implemented to the fact that now the musculature is not into continuous use. So putting that fear of malignancy into them and counseling them and treating the submucous fibrosis is one of our mainstays of practice. So looking at this picture, when a patient like this comes to us, he is a living nightmare for us. What exactly you do with such a patient, right? We can't examine him. We don't know whether there is any lesion underlying inside, whether to counsel them for surgery. Even these patients, they push the tobacco and betel nut from the sides of the mouth with a pencil or with any other instrument also to get that kick because of the habit, and they are not able to leave the habit. So, and the basic problem, as I told you, they come with burning sensation and inability to eat. And treatments have been varying in the past regarding the medical line of management and the surgical line of management. Briefly, as you all know, regarding submucous fibrosis, it is classically defined by Pindborg and Sirsat, where it is juxtaepithelial inflammatory reactions and stiffness of the oral mucosa. These are the clinical presentations where we see fibrous bands all over the oral cavity, anteroperoral fosses, soft palate, buccal mucosa, even in the angle of the mouth, and in the floor of the mouth also. The wonderful article which shows the basic transformation of the supple oral mucosa into a fibrous mucosa, where the 4 schools of theory are there, from the alkaloids to the flavonoids, the copper theory, and the constant chewing. Everything, as you all know, that the collagen, the basic type of collagen in the oral mucosa is type 3, and slowly it is converted into a type 1 type of collagen. And because of increased muscular overcontracture and increased level of soluble copper in saliva because of the arecanut and the alkaloids. And this is a flow chart which gives us the justification how the fibrosis develops and increases slowly and slowly. Now we must all be very clear what is the difference between the basic submucous fibrosis and radiation fibrosis. Now, when patients come to us with post-radiation, and if they have a pre-existing SMF, then the amount of fibrosis is much more as compared to patients with conventional submucous fibrosis, and it involves the joints also, and there was too many adhesions in the temporomandibular joint, and we need to not only go for intraoral fibrotomy, but sometimes we need to address the joint as well to release the fibrosis. And post radiations, of course, we are bound by the chances of radiation necrosis. So we normally don't advocate too much of surgical intervention unless we find a potentially malignant lesion developing again or a dental injury causing trauma to the underlying flap. Clinical presentation is fine, but the chances of malignant transformation in advanced submucous fibrosis is around 7 to 30%, and molecular markers and loss of heterozygosity is there. But I will not go into too much of theory. I'll just highlight a couple of cases and what difficulties, technical difficulties we face when we are treating the cases of submucous fibrosis. Very pioneering classification given by our peers, Khanna and Andrade, group 1, group 2, where the lesion is advancing, mouth opening is reducing to 26 to 35, group 3, 15 to 25 millimeters, and group 4 is advanced changes. And histologically, there are hyalinized smooth sheet collagens, extensive fibrosis, obliterated blood vessels, and eliminated melanocytes and loss of epithelial retipex. But on top of that, when there is chronic or constant frictional irritation because of the dentition, there is a time where the malignant changes they start. And unfortunately, it is very difficult to see because of the profound distance. The therapy of submucous fibrosis has been varied. We are bombarded by medical reps who come with photographs saying that you prescribe our medicines, you will get wonderful results for oral therapy, beta carotene, steroids, interferons, all sorts of things are hammered down us. But honestly, this is not a treatable disease medically. Only if you are very clear in counseling them at a very early stage, then these patients do respond. But the changes of the oral mucosa sometimes, and more often than not, are permanent, and the fibrosis normally doesn't resolve. Surgically, we have been trying out a lot of things in the past, like just doing a fibrotomy, putting a collagen membrane. But our mainstay of therapy in our practice ranges from the buccal fat pad graft and the nasolabial flaps. These are the two sorts of therapy what we are doing. I am not trained in microvascular anastomosis or any other advanced procedures, but I will be just sharing some viewpoints regarding the buccal fat pad and the nasolabial flaps in my talk. Now, as I told you, the chances of regression of the submucous fibrosis is not there, and treatment is, of course, final treatment is your surgical part, but we have to identify these candidates, right? Other than that, what happens in our scenario, that our routine practices like any dental procedures are practically impossible. And if you have patients has a loose prosthesis in the mouth, the chances of developing malignancies because of the traumatic injury is much higher. You cannot even retract the tissues or any buccal retraction to see what is going on. And any treatment required in the posterior teeth is practically not possible. Simple extractions of the teeth, they become so difficult. Bleeding is profuse, and suturing practically is not possible in these cases. You, more often than not, you will find a malignant lesion or a doubtful lesion in the RMT regions where the third molars are erupting. Those are the areas which have the most potential for developing the malignancies. So When do you ultimately treat a patient for submucous fibrosis for the surgical intervention? My thought process is very, very clear. First of all, the patient should have mouth opening less than 15-20 millimeters. If he is able to chew normally more than 20 millimeters, we discourage the patient to go for surgical intervention because it induces more amount of fibrosis. Secondly, the timing of surgery means patient should have left the habit at least 6 months back before we enter into the surgical therapy. Why is that important? Suppose patient says, okay, now I will stop the habit, you just do the surgery. The problem is that first of all, his body is used to the tobacco, his body is used to the areca nut, and we are stopping that. On top of that, we are adding the trauma of surgery. And this not only creates a very vicious cycle that ultimately patients end up into a psychological problem and they restart the habit again. So patients who are really motivated to stop the habit at least 6 months prior to the release of submucous fibrosis, these are the real candidates who should be planned for surgery. And of course, who will agree for a very vigorous follow-up and very stringent post-operative physiotherapy. So finding a right candidate for surgery is a very, very challenging task. Motivating them, patients do get motivated because of the pressure of their family members, but then ultimately they have to be the people who will have to undergo the post-op physiotherapy. Again, during anesthesia also, you cannot do any sort of awake intubation. You have to have access to fiber optic intubation, even for doing simple procedures or doing removing third molars, or we have to have a person competent enough who will give us the fiber optic intubations. So any extraction procedures, as I told you, it becomes very, very difficult. And we normally tell the patients to get your third molars out, and at least the chances of the development of lesions in the RMT region becomes less, because that is the area where your chances of the malignancy is highest. When we do the surgical release of the SMF, one debatable aspect is whether to remove the coronoid process or just to cut and let it go. Honestly, we as aggressive surgeons initially we believe that removing the coronoid is a big achievement, but honestly it induces much more amount of trauma. And cutting the coronoid and just letting it go, that is the coronoidotomy, is less traumatic and it effectively gives the same type of results. Right? These are the two commonest flaps what we are doing at our practices. One is the nasolabial and is the buccal fat pad for release of the submucous fibrosis. Now, when we compare these two, there are 2 to 3 areas of concern. One very important concerned area is a young patient who does not want any scar on the face. Second criteria for inclusion of these patients is how much amount of buccal mucosa is fibrosed. Sometimes only the retromolar area is fibrosed, the buccal mucosa is free. So these are not candidates where you require an interpositional graft. Right? Only removal of that third molars and doing the coronoid will take care of releasing the fibrosis. Patients who are of the older age group and have got excess skin in the nasolabial fold are actually the right candidates. But honestly, the buccal fat pad, although it is easier to harvest and it does not offer a second side morbidity, the problem with that is that it gets fibrosed over a period of time as it comprises of a similar tissue. Whereas the skin of the face, this nasolabial area, it does not get fibrosed and offers a long-term solution for treating the submucous fibrosis. The scars eventually they fade out, and patients they can definitely go for a good amount of physiotherapy in the later stages. A lot of articles have been highlighted in the literature, some giving advantages to the nasolabial, some giving advantage to the buccal fat pad. But buccal fat pad, over a period of time, what we have seen in many years, they do have a tendency to get fibrosed. And nasolabial offers a much longer and a more predictable outcome. the nasolabial also sometimes does not have, it has its fair share of mishaps also, like flap necrosis, and patients always complain of intraoral hair growth, which is many times cumbersome. Facial scars, of course, nobody wants on the face, but then it fades out over a period of time. The persistent orocutaneous fistula can be taken care in the second surgical intervention. Sometimes even you have the widening of the oral commission. Now, important is that if you injure this angle of the mouth during your fibrosis release, the patient, this area normally is not reconstructed because the flap, nasolabial flap, does not extend exactly at the angle of the mouth. And this raw area is actually quite painful to the patient, and patient gets demotivated to do the post-operative physiotherapy. And once that demotivation sets in, the fibrosis again sets in. So we have to be very careful not to injure the angle of the mouth during the surgical release. Another overzealous surgery done by somebody else, you can clearly see that if you injure the angle of the mouth, you can lead to adhesions over that area, and which may warrant another type of surgery and release. But again, these patients who have a tendency to develop hypertrophic scar, they can easily go into the refibrosis. Intraoral hair growth is one issue which patients do complain of, but honestly, over a long period of time, 2 to 3 years, it atrophies. And initial first 4 to 6 months, we can even go for plucking it out with the mosquito forceps, or a laser therapy is done after 6 to 8 months. At least once we are sure that the flap has taken up completely. Now, most important is your post-operative physiotherapy. And when we take these patients for the surgery, we have to really drill the patients because initially they say, yes, we will do the physiotherapy, we will do a lot of exercises. But once the pain part starts in the post-operative phase, they lose the motivation. Right? So that counseling of the patients prior to surgery is of extreme importance. After everything is done and every part is taken care of, patients always want some prosthetic rehabilitation, or patients have loose teeth, or they don't have teeth in the oral cavity. And this actually is very detrimental to the patient who want to do a proper physiotherapy, because these patients, they require good sound teeth on which their physiotherapy can be done later on, for the putting of the mouth probes or using the Hister's jaw or the Ferguson's powder. If the teeth are not there, or if the dentition is very poor, the patients again lose the motivation for doing the physiotherapy and eventually leads to refibrosis. Very important part is during surgery that all the dental cusps which can cause potential frictional keratosis to the buccal mucosa, they should either be rounded off, or at least if the third molars are there, they should be removed during the surgery. No cases we would like to deal with where we leave the third molars in situ, because again and again this is going to come back and the fibrosis is going to increase over a period of time. Couple of cases which have been treated. This was done by us, and highly motivated guy. This was done with a buccal fat pad, and a good amount of mouth opening was achieved. And females normally, you can see the injury to the angle of the mouth here, but she was quite motivated to get into the physiotherapy mode. And obviously, being a female, she did not want any scar on the face. A female lady who has excess skin over and loose nasolabial area, these are good candidates for your nasolabial flaps, and they offer good laxity of that area, so you can easily insert the nasolabial flaps. The same case which I showed before, this is a 1-year follow-up of the same patient, and predictably these cases of nasolabial flap, they offer a much better solution as compared to your other techniques. And that's all. I just wanted to compare a couple of this thing. between the two techniques, and eventually, after many years of practice, we do have come up to the fact that first of all, identification of the patient with a good candidate for surgery. Secondly, motivating them for your post-op physiotherapy. And the third one is having a very long-term follow-up for these patients. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Devan. And we now move on to the concluding remarks from Dr. Bhavna Dave, ma'am.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
First of all, let me congratulate I Can Care, a team. It was a wonderful initiative to have this kind of programs, and to have this kind of program is going to really help us out. And as Dr. Diwan has rightly said, that Gujarat being a capital of oral pre-malignant and malignant lesions, I would definitely congratulate Gujarat University too. Dr. Diwan has explained everything so simply and very nicely. And I must say here that being a pediatric dentist, we have come across few patients who were, above 9 years, 9 to 13 years. They've also shown us certain, areas where we can see those rural areas where we have seen the cases of submucous fibrosis. So what he's saying is absolutely correct. And we need to, curb this, what you can say, this kind of situation in Gujarat. Thank you, Dr. Diwan, and thank you, the team.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.